posted. So I've just turned recording on now. So we are recording this so that I can send it out to you afterwards. And then quite often I put it up on my learning management system anyway. So it's never too far away. So yeah, turning off the waiting room has helped. So that means I shouldn't have to stop as someone comes in. There we go. So lovely. Welcome. It's lovely to see everyone. It's so great to see that so many people have responded to, and I know it's free and that helps, but so great to see so many people responded to coming along and learning about reportable incidents. I'm so pleased. That makes consultants like me very, very happy to see. So let's kick off. I'm going to share screen with you guys. Unlike most of the time when I usually start talking and presenting and I've forgotten to share the screen, I'm going to share screen first. So here we go. So let's have a look. Today, Thursday, we are going to talk about reportable incidents. Now, why have I chosen this topic to do? Because most, a great majority of the non-conformities are around incidents, as well as reportable incidents, but incidents. Now, what do I see the most in my consulting? Possibly people who don't know what a reportable incident is. Often providers and individuals within those provider services who don't even know the definition of an incident. Now, why is that happening? It's happening because we've got an open market service sector where people are coming from areas that they've never worked in a human service before. So they don't have the knowledge, the skill, or the qualifications to know these little nuances of, we all think incident, yeah, what's an incident? But unless you've looked it up in the dictionary or you've worked in a field where it matters what an incident is, whether it's human service or mining or anything like that, there are a lot of people who can't really define what an incident is. We're not going to go into definitions of incidents because that's not what today is about, but I'm just outlining what is going on in the landscape of that sector, yeah, and why we are incredibly pushing up barrel, a very heavy wheelbarrow up a hill, because we're dealing with some real difficulties in getting literacy. We need literacy, we need people to be literate about what it is and what it means to run a human service, and definitely what it means to what an incident is and what the NDIS Commission standards expect you to do about that incident. And then also the reportable incidents. Okay, so let's begin. Quick intro. So there's probably quite a few people here who've never met me because I saw a lot of names that I haven't recognized. So welcome to you. So my name's Gina. I'm a quality standards assessor. I have accredited for NDIS auditing and aged care. Over the last 20 years, I've done both sectors, health and community service standards, and I've also done the retirement village standards as well. So it's not my first rodeo. I haven't sort of come in, and become an auditor in the last 5 years. I've been assessing and auditing for a really long time, and it's really interesting, to watch this particular market and sector and see what's going on, which, in many ways can be not safe. So there's lots of pockets of brilliance and there's lots of pockets of innovation, and I love that, but there's lots of danger as well. So I just wrote a postgrad paper actually, which is probably going to lead on to some other research in collaboration with the university that I'm studying with. And what it was about was the worker orientation module, and did it really make a difference? And it wasn't looking like people, the providers that I had polled, wasn't looking like they thought it had, or that the knowledge areas that it was attempting to fill people's, to increase knowledge in had actually done the job. which, you know, that's the tool we're depending on to learn about an enormous range of, you know, abuse, neglect, how to treat a participant, code of conduct, etc., then we're kind of falling short. So it was very interesting for me to see that, and hence I thought it kind of gave birth to, you know, a few extra courses that I'm writing, and dealing with reportable incidences is going to be, you know, is one of those. So so that's my background. Now I am a full, you know, I'm self-employed full-time consultant. Sometimes I take the chance to work outside of the sector. I might take on small amounts of tenders with government departments or something like that, a little bit of work here and there, just because I did used to be a policy analyst and I do miss that work. But I love what I'm doing here in the NDIS sector. And I love watching the good stuff, you know. And as I wrote in the opening of my introduction to my research report that I just done, I've never seen a more innovative service sector, and I've never seen a more dangerous one. So we've got both these things working at the same time. So what we can do together is we can close the gap on that danger and try to make it safer. So what's a reportable incident? Let's get right down to it. For an incident to be reportable, a certain act or event needs to
I'm just in a
happen.
meeting, Steve, so I have to do this one.
Can we just mute ourselves? Would that be okay? For an incident or to be reportable, a certain act or event needs to have happened or be alleged to have happened in connection with the provision of support services. So remember, there's a couple of provisos. It has to be in relation to support services, okay? And it needs to be associated with one of the following 6 categories of incident. And here's what I would say to you about reportable incident categories and reportable incidents. There's 6 different types of reportable incidents, and every single person in an NDIS organisation should be able to quote what they are, not word for word, but know the category and the characteristics of what they are. Do you know why I think that should happen? Do you know why I believe that anyone that works in this industry should be able to quote what a reportable incident is? What do you think the logic behind that is for me? And feel free, please, to either do it in the chat box or speak it. What would be my logic? Someone's got to want to have a go.
Okay. The logic would probably be that if you don't know what the category of the incident is, then it's unlikely that they're actually going to make a report, and therefore we're not safeguarding our participants or young people.
Correct. So if you don't know what the 6 categories of reportable incidents are, you're probably not going to get reports of them, yeah? Because people don't know what they are. So we must know, we have to have the literacy around, first of all, incidents, but I'm not here to just talk about incidents. We have to have the literacy around reportable incidents for us to even think that anyone is going to bring that intel back to, yes, Daddy, that's correct, you got it too, to bring that back to you as a manager. So as a, you know, I've managed a lot of services over the years and CEO'd them as well. When I was a service manager, the most vital part for me was my staff. Why? Because they're my biggest asset and they're my biggest liability, depending on what I do, yeah? So where am I going to get my information from? I'm going to get it from my staff. I'm going to get it from those people on the front line. So when I see organisations that are only having meetings at executive level or at manager level, and they're not having frontline meetings, I'm worried. And I know, first up, they don't understand governance. They probably don't understand compliance. They don't understand risk because they're not having meetings with their frontline staff. They are your eyes and ears on the ground. And the better I have performed as a you know, the great things that I have done with some organizations in lifting them out of, you know, embargoes and sanctions and stuff like that over the years has been by using those staff and upskilling them, performance managing them where necessary, getting rid of them where I've needed to, but upskilling and making their intel work for me. Okay, that's where my data comes from. We want to be data driven. So if you don't know them, you're not going to report them. And if I didn't know that already, I've carried that on since my first year as a dental student, back in 1985, where we were made to recite a part of the Dental Act which covered the work of a dental therapist. And we used to think, oh my God, we'd have to stand up there and, you know, all through the year and the next year and the next year, you know, we would be asked to recite this 53B of the Dental Act. The reason was they said, we are going to make sure that you understand what it is you can do and what it is you can't do. Yeah. And it's worked because, I mean, that's a long time ago and I can still remember what part of the act it is. You know what I mean? But it worked. We knew what we could do. We knew what we couldn't do. So repetition works. So, you know, I tend to use repetition a lot, and asking people what are the 6 categories, continually doing that, having it up in front of you at every workstation, in every still house, in the office, everywhere you can, because repetition will increase the likelihood of remembering and having that go into those long-term, you know, memories of yours. So, that's the start. So it's probably not where you thought we were going to start, but we need repetition. We need to know what reportable incidents are. You can turn it into fun if you want. You can have reportable incidents spelling bees, you know what I mean? And you can give out lollies. You can do anything you want, but increase that literacy. So what are the reportable incidents? We've got the death of a person with a disability, the serious injury of a person with a disability, the abuse or neglect of a person with a disability, the unlawful sexual or physical contact with or assault of a person with a disability, sexual misconduct committed against or in the presence of a person with a disability, including grooming of the person with a disability for sexual activity, the use of restrictive practice in relation to a person with a disability where the use is not in accordance with an authorisation, however it's described in your state or territory, in relation to that person, or if it's used outside of what it's meant to be used for as per the behaviour support plan. Okay, so what we find is that we really need to sometimes break down what some of these mean. If you're not from this sector, if you're not from, you know, child protection, if you're not from community service, and you're not from health, then you haven't done this, you might need to just take a moment out and learn what some of the parameters around what these are, especially around abuse and neglect, especially around unlawful sexual and physical contact and sexual misconduct. So if you're not from these sectors, human services and health, you possibly won't have a good understanding of that. And it's really important, if the person at the top of the organisation doesn't know, it all starts from the top. So everybody needs to know. If you're in this business, it's your business to know. So I'm trying to figure out ways where it might be easier for people to remember what some of these are. You know, anagrams are pretty good. So what I've done is rearrange those and made it into something called Dr. Source. Okay, so we have Dr. ABC, and I think it's Dr. ABC, something else now, but Dr. Source. So if you can try to get your staff to remember this. I've also made up a A4, which you'll all get as a download. You can pin that up everywhere and you can start to have it in, you know, remember everyone used to have what to do if there's a bomb threat. You know, it was everywhere, in every office, in every booth, in everywhere you went, what to do if there's a bomb threat. We want, in NDIS, we want what is a reportable incident, Dr. Source, death of a person, restrictive practice. So that's the doctor. Serious, the first S is serious injury of a person with a disability. The A, abuse or neglect of a person with a disability. The U, unlawful conduct, whether it's sexual or physical. It's the unlawful that's key there. and S, sexual misconduct. And then it goes down. Now, if we can get people remembering those first few words, it's okay that they may not know every other part of that to start with, but if they've got some idea of what this context around each of the reportable incidences is, we're going to have much better reporting. We're going to have possibly less occurrence of it. And I'll give you an example why. There are providers that I've spoken with who have incidents where their staff members touch unwanted touching of females. A male may do, unwanted touching of a female. Maybe they don't know that they're not supposed to. I doubt it, but maybe they don't. Let's face it, people come from all different countries, all different nationalities, all different places where they've grown up. We're not all the same. We're not cut by a cookie, it's not a cookie cutter thing. Even if somebody does know it's not quite right, but let's maybe think, well, nobody's ever told me not to. I don't really know the drill in this service sector. They're going to know. We've got to make sure they're going to know. So the education is not just for reporting. The education is around being really clear with people what you're not allowed to do themselves. Okay. So we need clarity. We need repetition. We need people to understand. We need them to remember. We need them to know, and we need them to know so that when they see it, they can report it as well. So there's quite a number of layers to that literacy. Yeah. So death of a person with a disability, sometimes people are a bit confused about that. There is a great place on the NDIS website when there is a death of a participant. Now, the good news is that you don't have to know exactly whether you have to report or not. It's okay to report. The Commission say, we don't mind who reports the death of a participant, even if you're not a provider and you've noticed that someone who was a participant of the NDIS has died. You can't have enough reporting. They're not going to get angry with you. We did the circle concept with our staff. Well done. As long as you have something, that is fantastic. Notify the NDIS Commission when a participant dies is the most important thing. Now, this doesn't apply just because you've heard that in someone else's organisation, the participant died. If you don't know about it, it's not really, you don't have to report every hearsay that somebody's died. But if the participant who's receiving services from your organisation dies, simply report it to the Commission. Now, that might be that somebody's just receiving lawns and cleaning. It might be that you've heard, for example, I've had an organisation that heard through another provider that the person, because they work in collaboration with other providers, and they heard from the other organisation that when they turned up to do their personal care, that the person had taken their own life. Now, it is the organisation that turned up and saw that, it's their obligation, not the person who's doing that was told secondhand. But it wouldn't matter if you did. The Commission are not going to get angry with you because two people reported it. They're not. So if a participant dies in your care due to an accident or an injury, most certainly, yeah. So that's not a particularly difficult concept to grasp, that one, which is good. It's nice to have some non-difficult concepts occasionally. The restricted practice, authorised use or not in accordance with the BSP, okay? So this can get really clear if you let it. Now, it's not always clear to people in the beginning, especially if they've got no experience in this area. So a restricted practice is used when it's used where a provider does not have a 2A registration, knowingly or unknowingly. Now, very sadly, does it ever happen knowingly? Yeah, it does. There are people who know they're not registered for 2A. Sometimes you can inherit a client that is going to require a behaviour support plan with restricted practice. And okay, they're in your service now. Let's do the best we can. Let's soldier on and do it as a reportable incident. But when you take another and another and another and another, and your 2A is not there, there's something wrong. Yeah. So knowingly or unknowingly, if you're using a restricted practice on a client and you don't have a 2A registration, number one, not good. Then there are times when you use a restrictive practice in an emergency situation or a life-threatening situation, which could be as simple as stopping somebody from running on the road, yeah? And they could get hurt from that as well. So that's still a reportable incident. You've used a restrictive practice, okay? The inappropriate use. So some people do have behaviour support plans and they do have a restrictive practice in that behaviour support plan. And let's say the organisation is registered and they've got their 2A, etc. But let's say that somebody is not using it in accordance with the way the behaviour support practitioner said they should. Yeah. Now, there may be warning signs that this is happening. Okay. Now, some of that might be that participants have been subjected to inappropriate use of restrictive practice, including, you'll see indicators such as red marks, bruising, tears or grazing on the skin tears or grazing on the skin that appear to be associated with a physical restraint, tiredness, drowsiness or confusion. Now that can be from PRN medication being used maybe a little bit too, what's that word? Often, yeah, but maybe not for the right reason. Observed increase in the participants' frustration, anger, or that they make complaints. So there are some indicators that your staff might be using restrictive practice a little more for themselves than for the client. And bearing in mind that restrictive practice is there to make the client's life more high quality, to help them reach their goals, to keep them safe, okay? Now, sometimes there are reasons that we have to use restrictive practices because a client can be dangerous as well, but it's got to be in a report, it's got to be in the behaviour support plan, okay? So if you will see staff doing this, it isn't going to stop. It's been there for 20 years, 30 years. It isn't going to stop overnight. In fact, it's probably never going to stop. So keep your eyes out for who is using PRN the wrong way, who is using environmental restraints when they don't need to. Are they using, are they sort of trying to eliminate or at least, reduce the amount of restrictive practices used, or are they just going in for the PRN as soon as they get on shift? Yeah. So if a restrictive practice is unauthorized or not in accordance with the BSP plan, that is a reportable incident. Okay. You'll often see indicators which might be if someone's using PRN too often, you might see signs of refusal to take the medication or fearfulness of medication. Okay, so there are some warning signs. Serious injury of a person with a disability sounds easy, but let's have some definition. Serious harm means the harm is not minor or trivial. It involves substantial physical, emotional, or psychological impact on the impacted person, such as a serious injury or serious emotional psychological distress. Okay. Example 1, an occupational therapist attends the home of a person with a disability to conduct an assessment. While speaking with members of the person's family, the person with a disability puts their hand on a stovetop and suffers a serious injury. The incident occurred at the time of service delivery, but was not directly related with or caused by the service delivery. This is not a reportable incident and does not require notification. Example 2, a person with a disability is accompanied by a worker to attend a physiotherapy appointment. As they leave the office, a tile falls off the roof and hits the person who sustains a serious injury and needs hospitalisation. Although this happened at the time a person was receiving a service from the NDIS provider, the service delivery was coincidental to the injury cause. The incident did not occur in connection with the service provision and does not require a reportable incident to be lodged. Example 3, a speech pathologist may develop an eating and drinking plan for a person with a disability who later chokes in their home when following this plan and requires hospitalisation. That's a serious injury. While the incident did not occur at the time the plan was developed and provided by the speech pathologist, there may be connection between the injury and plan if it did not adequately address the choking. So you have to be able to look beyond the black and white and assess every situation on its own merit. Okay. Neglect. we're going to start with neglect, abuse or neglect. Now, there's a lot of neglect out there. And what I see is, I actually see that there's a mismatch in the definition of what people understand neglect to be. I see it a lot. I see it a lot in SIL homes. And yeah, so inappropriate or inadequate shelter or accommodation, including unclean or unsanitary living conditions. Sadly, I've seen unclean and unsanitary living conditions in SIL homes. Neglect, some indicators of it might be that, you know, someone is losing weight. Maybe someone is requesting or begging or scavenging or stealing food. People who, you know, indicators of being very hungry or thirsty all the time. Inadequate supply of fresh food when you look around in a SIL home, or even in a person's home, depending on who they're living with. So be aware. Constant fatigue, listlessness, or falling asleep. Dropping hints that appear to be about neglect. Someone doesn't do this, someone doesn't do that. Extreme longing for company. Poor hygiene or poor grooming, overgrown fingernails and toenails, unclean hair, unshaven, unbathed, wearing dirty or damaged clothing. So there are things to look out for, and things to teach your staff to look out for. Because an owner operator, you can't look at everything, but you have your staff and they are your best intel. So you can teach them to look for everything. And you know what? Sometimes when your staff learn about these things as well, they will either know that something that from wherever they've grown up, it might have happened, but it's not actually the way things are supposed to be. Also, they might feel an inner shame and go, wow, I have been doing that a little bit and maybe I could stop. Yeah. So there's a lot that can come from this. There's self-knowledge there's the self-knowledge for the person working in the service, and them having to learn to pull their own socks up. And sometimes pure shame can do that to them just by reading and knowing. You know, people come from different countries. There are war-torn countries that people have come from. Some people have come from different living arrangements, different everything. Don't think everyone knows what's sanitized and clean and is, because it's not so. It's just not the way it is. Inappropriate or inadequate clothing for the weather. You know, short sleeves on a cold day, too much on when it's the other way around. You know, it's a hot day. Lots of little things to look at. Unattended physical problems. When you see someone's teeth, look close and see, do they need, you know, have their dental and medical needs been attended to? And social isolation as well. So are people being kept separate for no good reason and without anything in a behaviour support plan written by without having an authorised restrictive practice? Abuse indicators. So I'm be giving you an indicator document, so you'll be able to take that with you. So it's probably not a lot of point in going through so many indicators, but I'll just show it to you. There's psychological and emotional verbal abuse, domestic violence, neglect. We've already looked at that one. So you'll be taking this one with you. Things to look for in people's homes when there's domestic violence. Don't think domestic violence can't happen in SIL houses, because it can. And then your psychological and emotional indicators, which we will, if we're looking out for these things, if we're being observant, we can pick up. So you'll get that particular thing. Unlawful conduct, sexual or physical contact, including grooming of a person. So inconsistent, vague, unexpected or unlikely explanation for an injury. Unexplained injuries, broken bones, fractures, sprains, bruises, burns, scalds, bite marks, scratches or welts on the participant, or maybe even on a staff member. Other bruising and marks that may suggest the shape of the object that caused it. Avoiding or being fearful of a particular person or worker. Being overly compliant with workers. Frequent or overall drowsiness associated with a head injury, so always on the lookout. Out of character aggression. Now, what I wanted to say just about this one, really good examples are, as I described, I think I was talking about someone who was new to the sector, from a different country, not a lot of English, and was touching a client and rubbing up against them with their leg, etc. The client reported that because they didn't like it and they didn't feel comfortable with it. And, you know, that is a good example of unwanted physical contact, and when rubbing up against the leg and asking for a hug as well. Well, actually asking for a hug, but having the hug anyway, not waiting for the answer. You know, the sexual or physical contact, which is unwanted, that's unlawful. People can't do that. So, I mean, that person was actually fired. And didn't it turn out that they didn't have a worker screening check for that person anyway? I mean, that's just maybe a fluke, maybe not, you know, who knows? That's what the worker screening check's for, is to find out those things. The sexual misconduct committed against or in the presence of a person with a disability, including the grooming of a person with a disability. So you dropping hints that appear to be about abuse. People drop hints that could be taken either way, so that they have a they hedge their bets, you know, something about a date or something about sex, or mentioning it, they're testing the waters. So, you know, none of that is okay in front of a paying client, let alone in front of a vulnerable client. When, you know, we know there's been a lot of cases of sexual abuse in accommodation service. It happened a lot in the past. People are still intent on having sex with people who can't look after themselves. Bruises, pain, bleeding, redness, swelling around the breasts and genitals, torn, stained or bloody underwear or bedding, repeating a word or sign such as bad, dirty when associated with their private parts, presence of a sexually transmitted disease, pregnancy, that's a giveaway, sudden changes in behaviour of character, depression, anxiety, crying, sweating, trembling, withdrawal, agitation, anger, violence, absconding, sexually expressive behaviour, seeking comfort and security. No one is saying this means that someone's been sexually abused, but what it is something to look out for and make mention to your employer. Or if you are the employer, look carefully, start looking carefully. So we need to be on the lookout for these. We need our staff to know this. If staff don't know this, how can they be our eyes and ears? So sleep disturbances, refusing to go to bed and or going to bed fully clothed. That's a definite one, which I've seen a lot in services, going to bed fully clothed to protect themselves. Refusing to shower, yeah, also some, especially I have seen that in aged care where people have been abused. Some people will refuse to shower because they're frightened of what's going to happen. Now, next phase of this, the obligations, all right? So first of all, obviously the obligation is to train your staff. And it's not just because I think they should be, but it says in our practice standards, we're going to do these things. Now, your practice standard says in indicator 1, there are 4 things your practice standard says about incidents. And it says that your incident management system is maintained and it's relevant to the proportion and proportionate to the scope and complexity of the services delivered to the size and scale of your organisation. What that says in plain English, if you're a SIL service, you have a whole lot more complexity and a whole lot more compliance, and you need a bigger, more robust system. Yeah. Maybe not always bigger, but certainly more robust. Yeah. If you are not a SIL service and you're just doing lawn mowing and domestic assistance, you need a different small size, system, because you don't have the complexity of the supports. And then there's in between. So, big orgs will often need big solutions. Medium-sized organizations will need medium solutions. Small-size orgs need small solutions. If you've got a small-size organization though, and it's got a SIL, then we've got to up the robustness of that. Yeah, it has to capture a lot more information when you've got a supported independent living service. They are the highest risk clients, okay? Because we've got 24/7 care. That's what makes it the highest risk. At the top of the hierarchy of risk is that it's 24/7 care. You couldn't get much higher in risk than that. And then all the complexities, of course, underneath that. But what do we need in a nutshell? Let's just break it all, the jargon down. You need to make sure that the person's rights are managed. You need to make sure they know their rights when they come into your service. You need to make sure that your staff are trained around incidents, and not just, you're not going to train your support workers about incident handling or incident management. You're going to train them about what these things are, what to look out for. And as I say, if they're one of the perpetrators, they're going to think twice about perpetrating once they know everyone knows. Okay, so it's a win-win. Forms and templates, they're compliance. You must have an reportable incident form. It must be on a form. There must be an investigation on that incident in most cases. Yep, especially if it's a reportable, there has to be an investigation. Number 4, you need to have oversight. You need to see not just each form sits in someone's folder. You need to have a list or the software that says, here's my report. Here's all my reportable incidents, or here's all my incidents. Yeah, I need to see this helicopter view. I need oversight of everything that's happening. You can use a register, you can use software. You need to analyze the trends and then make improvements where you can. Okay, so analyze the trends. Sometimes people miss that part out. We start getting the form, the investigation, we pop it in a register, and then who's looking at it? Someone has to be looking at it. Then it's translated into your policy. Some of those feedbacks that you're going to get from reportable incidents occurring where staff member was uneducated or shouldn't have been there, that should flow into some kind of change within your organization. Yeah. And you can build yourself flow charts, one-page flow charts to say, this is what you need to do for this. Have you done this? Have you done that? Checklists and flow charts are fantastic. So essentially what we're doing is we are embedding it into the organization, embedding it with your participants, with your staff, with all your documentation, with your oversight, with your continuous quality improvement through analyzing and translating. Yeah. So that's the first indicator in the practice standard. Second one, each participant's provided with information on incident management. That was also covered in there. I couldn't take it out of there because it is part of the process. Providers must provide info to clients. Best place is at admission. Best place is at admission. Best way is via a welcome pack. I'm not writing a prescription for how you should do it, but to me, best place is via a welcome pack. And whether that's on paper or a video or electronic, depends on your cohort of clients. However, whichever way you do it, it must be in the mode of communication that is needed or the preferred mode of communication for that person. Providers must update participants as to the progress and outcome of the incident, the report, whether it's reportable or not. Yeah, if they're involved in it, they need to have updates and you need to do them in writing. Otherwise, they don't occur. If it's verbal, it's not evidence. So, some of those things that change, once again, translate into policy, embedding this into your process. So these are the processes and systems. The indicator 3, demonstrated continuous improvement. We've already touched on that because I've once again, the last 2 have talked about the analyzing of the information that you're collecting and how you're going to make sure these things don't happen again. So the demonstrated continuous improvement of your incident management system, incidents recorded, incidents listed on a register or software, incidents analysed, where improvements are required, the organisation's continuous quality improvement system will record and track the improvements. Yeah, that will flow down, maybe to your policies, maybe not. Some will, some won't. Last indicator, all workers are aware of, trained in and comply with the required procedures in relation to incident management. They must be trained. Okay, now some workers are going to be trained in incident awareness because they don't know what one is, some in incident handling and some in incident management. Okay, there's, depending on the context, depending on the worker, the organisation must have records of this training. It didn't happen if you haven't done it. And best practice would be to do it annually. Remember, repetition, people are better with repetition. Okay. Then we've got there's just one other set of obligations. And I'm giving you this and I'm going into detail because my experience is most people haven't read their policy. I've probably met, 2 out of 10 providers that have read their policy. So here's where you're hearing it, so hopefully you're hearing things that you might not have known. So the obligations under the incident rules are not necessarily completely translated into those practice standards. They're not. So these still need to be in your policies. Yep. So one rule is, even if a reportable incident is alleged, not proven, it must be reported to the Commission. Okay. Second rule, duty of workers to notify the provider that a reportable incident has occurred. You need to train your frontline staff that they need to let you know. For them to let you know, they're going to need to know what they are. Okay. Rule 3, for reportable incidents that are due within 24-hour reporting period, the information at minimum must be these things that you see here. Okay, at minimum. It doesn't mean you can't add to it, but this is the minimum information that must be collected for those reportable incidents that are due in a 24-hour period, which is 5 of them. 5 of them are due within a 24-hour period. So if you're in the process of updating your incident report form, by all means, you can do a cross-check and go, have I got this? Have I got this? Have I got this? And what else do I need for me? So it's okay to have more. You've got to at least meet the minimum. Circumstances, rule 4, circumstances in which certain information relating to reportable incidents need not be obtained. Where somebody has been hurt, or it's the last thing you're going to do is ask them the information that you need. If they're traumatized, don't push them at that time. Just help them seek medical attention and get the information you need as soon as practical. And if there's going to be some kind of criminal investigation around something, and you think, oh, that could interfere with things going the way they need to go. So yeah, that's one reason why you might not get the information we just saw in Rule 3. Rule 5, you are obliged to keep the Commissioner update. So when you provide a submitted report, and at a later time, more information becomes available, hence like what we might have just seen, with someone who's traumatized, you didn't get to speak to them for 4 days or 5 days, but you've had to put in the report. If that information is vital to the Commission knowing regarding the level of harm, or the information might change the nature, so the category of report, it might go from a serious injury to a sexual misconduct, or something like that. They need to know. So your organisation must notify the Commissioner of any significant new information, and it must be in writing. Rule 6 from the reportable incident rules. Providing the Commissioner with a final report. The NDIS Commission may request for information. See, they're going to usually, and if you'll know this if you've done reports, they will ask you for more information most times, unless you're so good at doing the reportable incident that you've given them everything, and they still will often come back to you with something anyway. But they're going to ask for more information in most cases. They're going to want to know. They're going to want to see a very thorough investigation or an assessment, and how the person with a disability was impacted. Rule 7, record keeping. As a lot of you will know, the records must be kept for 7 years from the day that notification of the reportable incident is given, with the exception of when a person is under the age of 18. This goes for any medical records as well. When the record will be kept for 7 years from the date that person turns 18. Okay, so it's really good stuff to have in your. It's a bit hard to know whether to put that in your incident management policy or to put it in your records management policy. I used to have it in my record management policy, but then people weren't noticing it in the incident management policy, and I didn't want to have it twice. So sometimes having a link to it is a good idea. So records of any reportable or non-reportable incidents that involve staff must also be kept where the staff member experienced an injury. This in case the matter becomes a safe work matter. Okay, so it does have tentacles that reach into human resources as well. Just let me check that. Does the provider have to keep hard copies of incident reports? There's no necessity for the hard copy, but you must have electronic is fairly well accepted. But of course, that always comes back to, well, You know, is that acceptable? Well, what's your electronic storage situation? You know, if it's the desktop of your laptop, that's not acceptable. And believe me, there are providers who have storing their information on the desktop of their laptop. You must have some kind of well approved storage system, cloud-based, hopefully that's, you know, stored in Australia if you can, you know, but most people are using your 365s and Dropbox and Google, etc. But it's got to be cloud-based. So when you ask that question, no, it doesn't have to be, but if you're using your laptop or your computer, desktop computer, the desktop of your desktop computer, no, it's got to be stored safely. And so that brings us to the end. So here's the, let me just show you the, so I've obviously got the indicators for abuse for you. And I've got one of these for everyone. And yes, I'm going to give you a PDF version of this presentation in the hope that you might use it with your staff. So if anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to contribute, now's the time.
Gina, at the very beginning, you put up 6 categories of a reportable incidents. Are you able to just put that back on the screen, please? I just didn't get to.
How about I'll open this sheet that I'm going to give everyone when I send it out. This is a bridged version, yeah, so that hopefully that people can try.
Yeah, I got that one, but just at the very beginning, it was probably about your 2nd or 3rd page you put up, and it just had listed 6 categories of reportable incidents.
Let's have a look.
And it just said the death of a person with a disability,
yeah,
the serious injury of a person. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's much the same as the one that's on the other. So what have you taken away from that? And I'm hoping I'm going to hear what it is I want to hear. Education of staff, getting your frontline staff to bring you lots of information, increasing their literacy, everyone's literacy.
In my organisation I work with, I feel that what you've just gone through, we are playing our role and as in management and my position as office assistant to actually do all the reportable side of the actual behaviour incidents or the forms. I think though is another thing I would like training on is when our staff should actually fill out from the very beginning before it actually gets to where we have to then report it to the NDIS, but when the staff should actually fill out an incident or a behaviour report. That's something that I feel knowing when to advise the staff that they actually need to fill out an incident and behaviour report before it even to come into our organisation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's part of the training, isn't it? And some people have a rule in their organisation where their frontline staff never fill out a reportable incident, and other organisations train their staff to fill out a reportable incident, and that comes down to not a commission rule or anything like that. It comes down to a business decision on the business. If you were an organisation who'd experienced a lot of staff when they do reportable incidences or incidences of any kind, that it's just not done properly, then you'd be inclined to go, do you know what? I just don't want to fix everyone's incident reports. If that is what you experience, it's not what everybody experiences, but it is what some experience. So that's a business decision, and it has to be based on what you prefer your staff to do. If you're happier having them detect and report to you and then you taking over from there, if that works better for you, then do that. Yeah. But there's nothing that says that any particular staff member at any level has to do something at a particular point in time.
But it's even getting them to voice to us that an incident has happened. Like, you know, they might write on their progress note that someone has got quite verbally aggressive.
Then they haven't understood. That's where I'm going with the whole literacy. They haven't understood.
Yeah.
Because if they understood, how serious this was, and if this is part of their code of conduct, if you add it to and make it very clear in your employment contract, it says that if you don't report this, you are going to be performance managed. It can be something that you lose your job over. It's bringing up that literacy and understanding of how important it is. If they care about their job, they'll do it. If they don't, well, they won't care.
Okay, excellent.
Bring it home to them. Yeah, make it really, always make a song and dance of what's in the employment contract. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, and so a couple of other questions we've got here. Am I happy for you to use the PDF? Absolutely. Could I get a copy of this? Absolutely. Repetition. It is repetition. I just throw out, especially, I'll do that when I'm working with client groups and stuff like that, but also with mental health first aid, I will just continually ask people, what is, tell me what this is, tell me what that is. And by the end of the 2 days of training of mental health first aid, they'll know it, but it's only because of repetition. Yeah. Frontline staff incident management requirements. Was that you, Amy, asking that? Or was that somebody else that was saying that? So,
no, I wasn't asking. I was just saying that was my key.
Oh, cool.
Takeaway.
Yeah. Get the most you can out of those. They've got the eyes and ears. Have some, I even have on my agendas on the frontline level, you have incident, you have risk. You'll find that some people will start to tell you about risk when really, oops, that was an incident. You know what I mean? So anyway, it comes to you, and that you're not going to make a manager out of most frontline staff, but you can take their intel and translate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
My key takeaway is to ensure that staff are trained at every level. Yes, just appropriate to their level, but at their level. Yeah. And give them an easy way to remember it. Like Ritu has made something. If this Dr. Sauce doesn't suit your taste buds, then you can turn it in, make something else. But hopefully that will help. If it's there, we just want to get them to know it. If they don't know it, they are not going to be able to tell you when something's wrong. So thank you. And to anyone who attended, good on you, because, I'm sure a lot of people would say reportable incidents is a dry topic, and you're all here. So well done. It can really make a difference. We'll send out, we'll send out the email. And yeah, sound good, everyone? Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Me too. I can't change the email. Is it Prakriti? I can only send to the ones that's in Eventbrite. So whatever emails in there is what you'll get, where you'll get it from. Okay. So have a good day, everyone.
Okay. I'm giving my email anyways, so
You'll get it anyway. Yeah.
you're not the email, so it should be okay.
Oh, that's good. Good.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
Thank you.